Now is Republican Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance, who represents Ohio in the U.S. Senate. Thank you for being here, sir. So the mayor of Springfield, Ohio, Rob Rue, said, quote, all these federal politicians that have negatively spun our city, they need to know they're hurting our city. And it was their words that did it. Before Donald Trump talked about eating dogs and cats on a debate stage, it was you, Senator, who first elevated this baseless rumor. These are your constituents. So why are you putting them at risk by continuing to spread claims about Haitian immigrants, despite officials in your state saying that there's no evidence and pleading for you to stop?
Well, Dana, first of all, what's putting the residents of Springfield at risk, which was a town completely ignored by the American media until Donald Trump and I started surfacing some of these concerns, is that they can't afford housing, they can't afford health care. The schools have been overwhelmed, the hospitals have been overwhelmed, and they're overwhelmed because Kamala Harris allowed 20,000 Haitian migrants to get dropped into a small Ohio town of about 40,000 people, and it's completely overwhelmed the services. Now, you ask, why have I talked about some of the things that I've been talking about? Let me just say this. My constituents have brought approximately a dozen separate concerns to me. 10 of them are verifiable and confirmable, and a couple of them I talk about because my constituents are telling me firsthand that they're seeing these things. So I have two options, Dana. I can ignore them, which is what the American media has done for years to this community, or I can actually talk about what people are telling me. And of course, many of the things that the media says are completely baseless have since been confirmed. For example, I was told, Dana, that by the American media, that it was baseless that migrants were capturing the geese from the local park pond and eating them. And yet there are 911 calls from well before this ever became a viral sensation of people complaining about that exact thing happening. So my attitude is listen to my constituents. Sometimes they're going to say things that people don't like, but they're saying things that people don't like because their town has been overwhelmed, and it's my job to try to fight for them and to protect them. Kamala Harris opened the border, and now these people are suffering. That's what I'm focused on, Dana.
Senator, I have to go through several things that you just said. First of all, the Clark County Sheriff and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources reviewed 11 months of 911 calls. They only identified 2 instances of people alleging Haitians were taking geese out of parks. They found 0 evidence to substantiate those claims. Also, other evidence that you have talked about, even you've retweeted alleged evidence, are unsourced social media videos from a different city, apparently no connection to Haitians. And this is from a conservative activist who offered a $5,000 reward for such things. And then going just backly to the schools and the hospitals and so forth being overwhelmed, nobody is disputing that the town of Springfield, Ohio, needs help. But you're not just a bystander, you're the senator from Ohio. So instead of saying things that are wrong and actually causing the hospitals, the schools, the government buildings to be evacuated because of bomb threats, because of the cats and dogs thing, why not actually be constructive in helping to better integrate them into the community? Because there are a lot of employers there who say that the Haitian workers are helping fill jobs that they need desperately filled.
Dana, first of all, let me just respond to a couple of things that you said, but I want to start with something you said, which I think is frankly disgusting and is more appropriate for a Democratic propagandist than it is for an American journalist. There is nothing that I have said that has led to threats against these hospitals. These hospitals, the bomb threats and so forth, it's disgusting. The violence is disgusting. We condemn it. We condemn all violence.
Senator,
and
this
threats
happened
of violence.
after you and President Trump were on the debate stage, said that cats and dogs were being eaten.
You asked a question, Dana, and I'm going to go ahead and answer it. What we have said is that this town has suffered terribly under the policies of Kamala Harris. Now, you just accused me of inciting violence against the community when all that I've done is surface the complaints of my constituents, people who are suffering because of Kamala Harris's policies. Are we not allowed to talk about these problems because some psychopaths are threatening threatening violence. We can condemn the violence on the one hand, but also talk about the terrible consequences of Kamala Harris's open border on the other hand. Now, let me just fact check a couple of other things that you said, Dana, because it's important. You said that all of these migrants are in the country legally. They are in the country through what's called temporary protective status.
Right.
That is when Kamala Harris waved a magic amnesty wand, taking people and giving them legal status. That is not to say that they're here legally. That is a terrible indictment of her amnesty policies that have further opened the border and further caused terrible migration into this country.
You might not agree with the policy, and obviously you don't, which is totally fair and legitimate. There are policy disagreements all the time. But the fact is, it is the law because President Biden and Vice President Harris are. But I don't want to frankly go down this conversation about policy
Dana,
because
you made a point. You don't. I agree. You don't want to talk about policy.
No,
Dana,
what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about
instead of about the fact,
Senator,
that Kamala
it was
Harris,
your distraction.
Dana, granted amnesty.
You were the one who started talking about eating dogs and cats.
Level.
You were the one who brought this
my
up.
Constituents
the president
were the
said
ones
it to
who talked
60
about eating
million
dog and
people.
cats, and I talked about it because you were ignoring this community. My constituents talked about it.
Have you been to
Springfield? It is my responsibility to surface their concerns when the American media
ignores it. Have you been to
Springfield?
Springfield?
Dana, I've been to Springfield probably 100 times in my life.
How about
I've taken
recently,
my children
since
to
you've
get
heard
ice
this?
cream at Young's Jersey Dairy.
Have you heard recently since you've gotten these calls?
Have I been in the last 4 days?
No,
I
I'm
haven't
talking
been
about
in the last 4 days, but I've
since
talked
you've
to a lot
gotten
of
these
people
calls
in
from the
Springfield,
constituents.
Dana, and they're telling me this stuff is happening. Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then let me answer them, or would you like to debate me on these topics? I noticed that when you had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you gave them multiple choice answers to the questions that you asked, and you allowed them to answer the questions. I'm happy to be here to talk about policy, but if you're going to interrupt me every single time that I open my mouth, then why am I even doing this? So please ask a question, and I'd ask you to be polite enough to let me answer it.
Yes, I am, and I think that if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz were making unsubstantiated claims that had racist undertones about people eating dogs and cats, and they didn't answer the questions about that, then I would have similar interactions with them. As you know, I am very grateful that you come on the show, as I am for other Republicans. But this is something that you're hearing from constituents. I did a lot of reporting. I talked to people in Ohio over the weekend, and they're really worried about these claims. The policies, yes, I am agreeing with you that what I heard is that there is concern that these migrants, there's a lot of them, and the integration isn't being done fast enough and well enough. And that's a totally legitimate conversation. But there are other conversations that are happening. Aiden Clark, who is an 11-year-old boy who was killed in Springfield last year. It was a car accident involving a Haitian immigrant. You said that he was murdered. His father said that's not true. It was an accident. Here's what he said to you.
Politicians, Bernie Moreno, Chip Roy, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump, they have spoken my son's name and used his death for political gain. This needs to stop now. They are not allowed, nor have they ever been allowed to mention Aiden Clark from Springfield, Ohio. I will listen to them one more time to hear their apologies.
Senator, he's asking for you to apologize. Will you?
Dana, first of all, my heart goes out to the Clark family, and I don't bring their son's name up because they've clearly expressed a preference for politicians to not bring their son's name up. I wish them all the best. I can't believe what kind of a tragedy they've experienced, but I'm still going to keep on talking about what the migrants have done to Springfield, Ohio, and what Kamala Harris's open border has done to Springfield, Ohio. And Dana, I think this illustrates the entire contrast between how we're trying to go about this debate and how a lot of the Democrats are trying to go about this debate. They're talking about 12 Proud Boys marching in Springfield, Ohio. They're talking about the frankly fake debunkings of a lot of these stories that are out there. I'm talking to my constituents and I'm hearing terrible things about what's going on in Springfield, and Kamala Harris's open border policies have caused these problems. The hospitals are overwhelmed, Dana. The schools are overwhelmed. The local services are completely overwhelmed. You have people who can't afford housing. Homelessness has gone up. Murders are up by 81% because of what Kamala Harris has allowed to happen to this small community. I'm going to keep on talking about that. Now, of course, we can criticize violence. We can also still talk about the problems that are happening in Springfield, and we should be able to do both those things simultaneously, Dana.
Just once and for all, you again started this in part by saying that, at which Donald Trump repeated on the debate stage, that, and he didn't say anything about the policies that you're talking about. He just said Haitians are eating dogs and cats. Can you affirmatively say now that that is a rumor that has no basis with evidence?
Dana, the evidence is the firsthand account of my constituents who are telling me that this happened. And by the way, I've been trying to talk about the problems in Springfield for months, and the American media ignored it. There was a congressional hearing just last week of angel moms who lost children because Kamala Harris let criminal migrants into this country who then murdered their children. The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to,
but it wasn't just a meme,
create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana, because you guys are completely letting Kamala Harris coast. You had one interview with her. You talk about pushing back against me, Dana. You didn't push back against the fact that she cast the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which is why a lot of Americans can't afford food and housing.
You just said that you're
creating
creating a story.
Public policy.
Sir, you just said that you're creating the story.
What's that, Dana?
You just said that this is a story that you created. So the eating dogs and cats thing is not accurate.
Dana, it comes from firsthand accounts from my constituents. I say that we're creating a story, meaning we're creating the American media focusing on it. I didn't create 20,000 illegal migrants coming into Springfield thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. Her policies did that, but yes, we created the actual focus that allowed the American media to talk about this story and the suffering caused by Kamala Harris's policies.
Do you condemn the Proud Boys, even if it's just 12, even if it's just one marching in Springfield?
Dana, I condemn all white supremacists. I'm obviously not. I'm married to a non-white person. I don't like these people, but I think that we have to keep our focus not on 12 marchers going down the street, but on the fact that thousands of residents have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's policy. I find this very unusual, Dana, that the American media is more interested in a bunch of losers marching down the street than they are in the fact that Kamala Harris has made these people's lives worse. I'm not talking about 12 Proud Boys. I'm talking about 40,000 residents, 40,000 constituents of mine, many of whom can't afford housing and food because of Kamala Harris's open border. That is what I want to focus the media's attention on. We're going to keep on doing it because I think the American people deserve a government that puts their interests first. Can I make just one more final point about this, Dana?
Yes, please.
You've heard a lot of the media focusing on every possible distraction from the story in Springfield. You've heard them focus on these Proud Boys marchers. You've heard just in this interview, Dana, the suggestion that because some psychopath is calling it a bomb threat, somehow we have to then ignore 40,000 Springfieldians who are having their lives worsened by Kamala Harris's policies. Well, what is the implication, Dana? I actually love to have this conversation right now live on air.
Right.
What is the implication when you say you calling out these problems has caused a bomb threat? You accused me of causing a bomb threat. Doesn't that mean you should shut up about the residents of Springfield? Don't you realize you're engaged in basic propaganda to silence the concerns of American citizens?
I was quoting the actual mayor of Springfield, Ohio, begging after the bomb threats, begging federal officials, to please stop putting negative attention on his city. And I'm not talking about the policies. I'm not talking about the very real challenges that Springfield has. I'm talking about baseless rumors about Haitians eating dogs and cats. And that, after that was said on a debate stage, that is when these bomb threats started. And that is a fact. Senator, I just want to move on. I have two other quick issues separate from this that I want to talk to you about.
Dana,
go ahead.
Again,
please, go ahead.
I think this is actually an important conversation.
Okay.
Look, the Springfield mayor, he's dealing with a lot of terrible things. I certainly sympathize with the guy, and we're going to try to help him out. But he did not accuse me of inciting a bomb threat. He just didn't. And if we're going to take the firsthand accounts of people who are on the ground in Springfield, why don't you bring on some of the people on your program who say that the migrants are eating their pets? You're applying a double standard here. You're saying if one person accuses J.D. Vance, I'm going to take that person's word as the gospel truth,
you have somebody
even if you misrepresent it. If you have another person who's saying they're eating the cats, you're going to completely ignore them, attack them, silence them, and harass them. That double standard is why people don't trust the media and why we're not talking about public policy 51 days out from a presidential election.
Okay. If you have somebody you want to tell us about who has proof that somebody ate their cat, of course we want to hear that. We certainly have had no evidence that that is actually something that happened. And I just want to say, I have not accused you of anything. I am quoting the mayor who said, after these bomb threats, federal politicians are negatively spinning our city. They need to know they are hurting our city. It was their words that did it. Okay? I'm quoting him, and it seems to be a
Dana,
cause and effect.
Roll the tape. You just accused me of inciting a bomb threat. There's no evidence of this. I condemn violence and threats of violence. We should be able to do that and also still talk about what's going on in Springfield.
I'm glad to hear that you condemn it. That is very important. We had a lot of other issues to get to, but I really hope that you do come back so we can talk about other issues. Senator, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dana.